When one is starting, it's hard to say whether it'll be successful or not. If it's a assured success, then there would be no risk. If there was no risk, everybody would do it, and if everybody was doing it, it wouldn't be unique or innovative. So innovation fundamentally involves risk-taking, and risk-taking means failure. I like to say my willingness to fail is what gives me the ability to succeed. And too many people just are not willing to fail, so they don't try anything new. I like to say you should try and fail, but not fail to try. Because the people who fail to try, fail to take risk, fail to do something, attempt something new, are failing before they start. They just don't know it. Also have to dare to be great. I'll tell you one little story. One of the most successful investments we made was a small company called Saran. We had just started to sell product. We were doing fairly well. We had $500,000 of revenue in 1997. And Cisco came and said, we'd like to buy this company for $300 million. Having invested $3 or $4 million for half the company, that'd be a pretty good investment. And yeah, we had one other investor. And I said, no deal. Because I believed in what we were trying to do. April came along, and somebody called me from Cisco and said, we'd like to offer $700 million. And we, at that point, with subsequent investments, owned about 35–40% of the company. And I said, no deal. August came along. I won't go into the details of the story, but they offered $7 billion. We did take the deal. Most of the time, when you start something, you want to do something meaningful and get started, and maybe smaller, but you want to keep innovating, building on it one step at a time, and hopefully it becomes much larger. Amazon started with just books. Now it's everything. If you look at Twitter or Facebook, when they started, they were relatively small things. Mark Zuckerberg was trying to connect everybody on the Harvard campus, not 7 billion people on the planet. But he kept expanding his vision. So very often when you start with an innovative idea, you don't know how big it is. In fact, most of the really innovative ideas have been very hard to predict what's a large opportunity or a small opportunity. Most people thought Airbnb would be this very small, niche little opportunity that a few people would rent out their rooms and it'd be a nice little business. Now it's huge. People thought Uber would be this limo service business. It's now bigger than all limos, all taxis, and maybe replacing personal transportation. So it's not possible to always predict everything and where things may go. But just because you can't predict where things may go, doesn't mean you shouldn't try or you shouldn't start. Once you start and you stay creative and innovative and keep trying new things, things expand. Add some value. There's a true societal and business value proposition. There's a contribution. I find, and I don't do this for reasons other than the fact that you can't long-term build a viable business without making a real contribution. Most people look at, they can start a business, do an IPO, make some money. Almost always that leads to businesses that are round trips, what I call they go up and go down. To build a durable business, you really have to focus on the value proposition. I think shaking things up is an essential part of entrepreneurship in sort of almost challenging, disrespecting authority, not being too confirming are essential parts of entrepreneurship. Building a team is the hardest thing for an entrepreneur to do because very often they don't know what they don't know, right? They know their area of specialty really well, but other areas they think they understand, but they don't. And every area is more complex and more nuanced than it appears to somebody. I see so many entrepreneurs who think marketing is about a press release or an advertising campaign. It's not. It's much more nuanced and sophisticated than that. So team building is very important. Some entrepreneurs do a really good job of growing. Larry Page is an example. Mark Zuckerberg is an example of being better at new functions as they come up. And also they've done a really good job of adding people who they can learn these new areas from. What I find is some entrepreneurs assume they know the answer, and that's very dangerous. And others know they don't know, and they hire the people who they can learn from. But they can still apply their entrepreneurial style in these new areas. Sometimes it makes sense for the entrepreneur to keep being CEO and driving the whole vision. Usually that's the best course. But some entrepreneurs can't think broadly enough to do that, and they can't grow fast enough. What transpired for me when I was probably 15 was reading in the late 60s about the founding of a company called Intel. Craig Barrett, the CEO of Intel, is here. And it developed as a role model for me of what I wanted to do. Of course, at that stage of my life, it seemed very, very far away. But many years later, and I'll tell you later that I'm a big fan of risk, I learned hang gliding. And while watching a movie about hang gliding, I saw this quote, this dedication of the movie. And it went something like this: dedicated to those who dare to dream the dreams and then are foolish enough to try and make those dreams come true. And the operative word here is foolish, because unless you transcend what's traditional, and I think we've talked about this earlier, unless you go past what's reasonable, you're not going to get someplace different. Most people do the traditional thing and get to traditional places. There is another way.